Snippy the Crab's Restaurant Caper, written and illustrated by Alison Miles, and read by me, Karen Poole. The water was chilly that wintry morn, night dark and foam-flecked the hour before dawn. But Snippy, long wakened, slid out from his lair, and slipped from his rock pool with confident air. Of his home and his friends he couldn't be fonder, but the lure of adventure still beckoned him yonder. He'd stayed in his rock pool this long autumn season. Since his scrape with the girls he'd had a good reason. But the urge to explore had grown day after day, so this dreary bleak morning he'd get on his way. Snippy knew of the dangers this crepuscule hour, when trawler men's radars the inky depths scour. So he kept his eyes focused, one up and one down, and sometimes they'd waggle all the way round. Hulls of huge boats loomed darkly on high, blotting the moonlight, silvering the sky. The water was icy and shivery grey. Snippy doubted his courage. Perhaps he should stay. Yet he spurred himself on with true Snippy insistence, and upping his pace, sprinted a distance. A pollock swam past him, a dab, then some bream. Followed by codfish, they came in a stream, all racing and chasing and rushing away, dashing past Snippy the opposite way. Snippy's interest was stirred, his eyes strained to see, but the water was churning and choked with debris. Yet he headed on bravely through the murk and the gloom. A trawler ship trawling for many meant doom. Snippy'd never once entered the trawler's reserve, and at a safe distance he planned to observe. But whoosh! Came the net like a terrible shawl, swooshing towards him, gobbling all. He clung to a rock with titanic zest, but his wee little form was whisked up with the rest, swirling and whirling, all head over heels, with turbot and mackerel and slippery eels. The force of the water scooped them all up, with Snippy as helpless as a stranded seal pup. He struggled to swim to the edge of the net, for its holes were quite large. He could still get out yet, but scratch, scratch went the net, and jerked from the sea. Squished up with the fish, he'd no chance to get free. The fishermen grinned at their fine marine haul. "That'll make us a mint. What a marvellous trawl!" The boat chugged to port, its catch to unpack. The crew working hard, it was no time to slack. On reaching the harbour, old and eroding, the ship docked up safely to start the unloading. Snippy's crate was passed out from the ship's chilly hold, and his eyes met the world dressed in dawn's hazy gold. He was tipped in a box marked Riverside Nosh, squeezed in with the fish and the ice crystal slosh. Then placed in a van, the doors slammed up tight. "Oh, a road trip!" quailed Snippy. Now this was a fright. But his journey was short, for just out of town, snug in a valley of green velvet down, a restaurant sat which drew many diners, for its famous cuisine could not have been finer. With a screech of the brakes, the van slammed a stop. The driver jumped out with a jaunty hip-hop. The doors were thrown open. The chef peered inside, and seemed very pleased with all there he spied. So he picked up the box of the morning's fine catch, with Snippy still tucked in this sea bounty batch. Back in the kitchen, Chef busied his team, explaining his plans for the cod and the bream. So Snippy slipped sneakily out from his crate, while the cooks were discussing the sauce for the hake. and he carefully crawled along close to the edge, hiding a moe behind each lemon wedge. On reaching the end of the huge countertop, Snippy looked down. Yikes! Oh! Quite a drop. The cabinet's sides were smooth and all slippy. There was nothing his crab claws could find at all grippy. And he fell to the floor, his hopes all disbanding. But the chef's booming voice masked his noisy crash landing. Young Snippy was shaken, for he'd taken a thwack. But he wobbled straight off to a parlour out back. There must be an exit, he surely supposed, but because it was winter the back door was closed. His heart skipped a beat as he took it all in. He was like a sardine trapped tight in a tin. So he settled himself half under a fridge. He'd figure this out, though it might take a smidge. Then something quite strange, an animal furry, four-legged and gingery, sleek and soft purry, strutted right past him and, raising a paw, with a tabasson tap, opened a door. Aha! Snippy glimpsed the wide world outside, a chance to escape, no need to hide, and he scuttled off sideways, hell-bent on the door. His claws clicky-clacked on the old wooden floor. But passing a tank, two huge eyes came in view, so helpless and sad, it just would not do. Snippy slowed, then he stopped. He couldn't escape and leave an old sea-mate alone to her fate. And besides, those aged eyes had a story to tell. Of a former encounter, they jangled a bell. Recalling the time of adventure quixotic, Snippy once had been dazed by this gaze so hypnotic. By scaling a bookcase he reached the tank's top, then leaning right over leapt in with a flop, and he raced straight around to the lobster's dread claws, which were bound up right tightly with very good cause, for pincers so mighty are prone to mishaps, like the crushing of fingers of poor kitchen chaps. But Snippy was fearless and snipped through the tape while explaining his plan to forge their escape. He ordered her strictly, Now follow me closely. It's perfectly safe, at least I hope, mostly." So both creatures straddled the lip of the tank and sank to the floor, which was draughty and dank. "Look there," Snippy pointed. "That flap opens wide. We can scramble right through and reach the outside." And he threw all his weight at the small see-through flap, which reluctantly opened the teeniest crack. But time was too pressing, and this method too slow, so the lobster stepped in with a heavy-weight blow. The flap flipped straight up. Snippy tumbled on through, hot-heeled by his friend in her coat of deep blue. The pale morning light was the heartiest sight, and despite their dire troubles, they beamed in delight, for the lawns led away to a stream muddy grey, swelling its banks that chill winter day. But all of a sudden a rough grating sound, the bark of a dog gathering ground, a danger young Snippy knew only too well, a beach threat too often he'd had to repel. This mutt was all lanky and silkily copper. To Snippy's wee eyes he seemed quite a whopper. And the dog, glancing once at the lobster's cruel claws, leapt towards Snippy with slavering jaws. Yet Snippy was ready, and striking a pose, tweaked very sharply the sleek doggy's nose. The hound yowled a howl. The cooks all looked out. Spying the lobster, chef started to shout, "Put down that carrot! Stop all your scraping! My prize supper dish is out there escaping!" He raced from the kitchen, utensils in hand. The cooks followed too, a bright trousered band. But Snippy and friends were well on their way. The welcoming river was not far away. The kitchen staff panted, each one running fast. The sous chef was sporty and put on a blast. He lunged for the lobster, strong arms reaching out. "I've got the big beauty," he started to shout. But plip went wee Snippy, and plop went his friend, as they slipped neath the surface and whooshed round the bend. The chef was dismayed and peered at the water. "Oh, bother you all! I wish someone had caught her!" But the rain had been heavy the previous day, and the water a bubblesome silt-brown affray. So the pair whirled in eddies and jostled together. Snippy clung to his friend as they tumbled wherever. For hazards were plenty, with shapes jutting out, trolleys and bikes, where there should have been trout. After a while the water grew clearer. Its brackish salt flavour could not have been dearer. The stream widened out as it cut through the beach. The sea Snippy knew was nearly in reach. Shells of soft colours patterned the sand, where mid-winter walkers meandered the strand. And at that very moment the stream met the sea, their pace slowing down as they drifted quite free. Bobbing along, Snippy soon saw his home, and unclasped his friend in the frithy froth foam. "Won't you come to my pool?" Snippy asked, looking shy. "No, no, my good friend," was the lobster's reply, "for the journey is arduous out to the deep. It will be many hours before I may sleep." Her voice, cracked and ancient, was scary to hear, but her eyes shone so kindly there was nothing to fear. "I can't thank you enough for saving my soul. I was sticklesome stuck in a terrible hole." And she turned to depart, her long limbs striding fast, for she knew every root of the ocean so vast. "But what is your name?" Snippy's voice trailed on after her. "Oh, Lavinia, my dear." The words rang with laughter, for happy was she in her natural domain, the sea's hidden depths where she planned to remain. Snippy entered his rock pool without cheers or pomp, for his friends did not know he'd been out on a romp. When they heard his new tale, they gawped at his pluck. "Oh, Snippy, thank goodness you're blessed with good luck." As the wan winter sun winked out from a cloud, Snippy gathered his friends to promise out loud. "Oh, like Lavinia," he pledged, "I intend to stay safe. My life belongs here. I'm no landlubber waif." Then his friends hid their smiles and winked at each other, for his wanderlust spirit Snippy'd soon rediscover, and he'd be on his way, some rain or shine day, on a wild escapade to a place far away. The end.